century, or why you don't name those three guys? Is that because it has with the green, let's say, peoples with the green, colors just knowing what it is? I would like to have the answer for that.
Well, I'm wearing a green tie, but I did not vote for Mr. Mousavi. And if you look at this report, I can even show you the picture of Mr. Mousavi, just so that you're pleased. What I want to say is that we should, here is Mr. Mousavi, there you go. Okay? Now, from a criminal law point of view, as opposed to a political point of view, one cannot say that a massacre happened, you were in the government, therefore you're responsible. It's not as simple as that. I'm not saying that these people are not responsible, but we have to understand how they're responsible. Are they legally responsible? Are they morally responsible? And I think that beyond the question of prosecuting people, we also need to think in terms of a truth commission. Because prosecutions are very narrowly defined. Prosecutions are about the defendant, not about the victims, right? The victims are only relevant if they can be linked back to the defendant. And in South Africa and Argentina, we had truth commissions, which allowed for tens of thousands of victims to come and tell their stories. And we have had examples in Chile, for example, after Pinochet went out of power. One of the first things that Patricio Aylwin did was to apologize on behalf of the government to all the victims of the atrocities under Pinochet. So all I'm trying to say is that justice has many different meanings. And yes, those who were in positions of authority back then, irrespective of whether they're legally responsible or not, will also have to come one day and at least explain, if not apologize. But I also want to say that we need to be careful not to say that anyone that is associated with that regime is forever to be blacklisted, because it's not as simple as that. Every revolution swallows its own children. And what we see throughout history is that the greatest threat to the power of the regime comes from within. What is happening in Iran is no different. So we have to understand that in the intermediate stage at least, it will be exactly those internal divisions that are going to help create a wider democratic space in which a genuinely new leadership and culture can emerge. But we can't, on the one hand, turn a blind eye to the fact that some of those who are now reformists were also implicated, but we also have to accommodate this transitional reality at the same time.
Well, we take two more questions, one at the front and one right at the back. You'll be waving in the
I would like to thank you for the Association of Iranian Political Prisoners. When I came to Sweden many years ago, I was young. And we were the first generation victims of those atrocities, which you are actually remembering today. But, well, the revolution is almost the children, but we are talking about grandsons at the moment. I was wondering how long it's going to take. 30 years, all those countries have changed. And Romania, after Ceausescu, got just going easy now. Everybody changing them back to their countries. But our country is still in pain and suffering. The question is here to, first of all, I wanted to thank you for that great speech that each one of you actually presented. It was beautiful in your documentary as well. Welcome to everybody. But the question is, what has happened to the fundamentalism of freedom in this country? That you were mentioning that people like Karl Marx came to this country, Montesquieu came to this country. What is the responsibility of the British public? And what has happened after 9/11? How is it that everyone is getting away with it? Iran is getting away with it. The United Kingdom is getting away with the occupation of Iraq. Everyone is getting away with it. What is about conscience? And I was, after the raising question of the time, and what our responsibility as a resident or citizen of the United Kingdom is, I wanted to ask and thank you for your effort, both Nazanin and Dr. as well. well done. But when we actually put a benchmark today, that we're going to start again, and how are we going to do it? But you told us about leaving Security Council or Parliament or whatever in Geneva. What was the result? Could you tell us how it's going to happen? Thank you.
So, as I understood, the question was about Iraq and what?
I was talking about the fundamental freedom in this country. It's happening on a day-to-day, because we said that you're no longer interested because it's not illegal. And what's happened after 9/11?
Well, I mean, and in terms of, let me focus on freedom of speech. In terms of that, like I said, that very fundamental right, a number of things conspired around 9/11, and in fact, some of them had already been developed previously to 9/11. It was much easier for the government to get backing for these kinds of measures in the wake of the kind of public hysteria about terrorism. Just as the McCarthy regime took hold in America in the 1950s because of a moral panic about communism. So various pieces of very tough anti-terror legislation, some of which were actually passed in 2000, which, for instance, made the possession of materials which might be useful to a terrorist a criminal offence punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Now, those materials can include books. They can include things which are easily downloaded from the internet. And we saw this in the case of a 19-year-old girl called Samina Malik, who happens to work in W.H. Smith's at Heathrow, and wrote some very bad poetry in which she fantasised about killing infidels. And she called herself a lyrical terrorist and circulated these poems on the internet, and she was subject to a court case under Section 58 of the Terrorism Act for possessing not just the poems but also various training manuals and so on that she had downloaded in her bedroom in West London. She seemed to pose no threat to the fabric of society, and her crime, to the extent it was a crime, was a thought crime, that she had very, very nasty thoughts about what she might like to do to some of us. Now, many of us have pretty nasty thoughts from time to time. So that's what worries me, is that idea that the business of the state, which once stopped quite far away from our front door, is now poking around in our bedrooms. It's now poking around in our computers and our private musings. And partly we are to blame for this, for sharing those private thoughts with the world through our blogs and email correspondences and our social networking sites, in the rather naive belief that these media are somehow democratic. We're actually giving vast amounts of data to corporations and to states with no interest in our views on our favourite music, but a lot of interest in what we might be thinking about the state and its implications. So I don't want to say much more about Britain. It's not the topic of today's event, but I'm very conscious that whilst, and I have to keep this in proportion, the kinds of atrocities taking place in Iran are not taking place in Britain. There is a spectrum, and we are, in this country, we're very close to one end of that spectrum. Iran right now is quite close to the other end of the spectrum. Burma and other places are slightly further down the line. But I do think there is a spectrum, and I think it's worth fighting for those liberties that we have. And as I said, not letting them be chipped away inch by inch by inch, because suddenly you've lost a mile and you're down the other end of the spectrum.
I believe you were asking what is the result of some of the activities that we've been doing. As a human rights activist, our work isn't always immediately apparent. There's an expression in Farsi we say, which means drop by drop we create an ocean of change. And I was at, as I said, the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva a few days ago. I don't know what's going to be the result of it immediately. I was happy, though, that the Islamic Republic of Iran felt the need to reply after I spoke to say that my claims were unsubstantiated. So little by little we can make the Islamic Republic budge. And it's not that I also just had that one speech in that room and that's it. We meet with individual missions. We meet with ambassadors from different countries and we give them recommendations because they really want to know what they want to know what we want from them. And if you are following, Iran's Universal Periodic Review is coming up at the UN. Every 4 years, countries are reviewed, and Iran's is coming up in February. And countries would like human rights activists and others to send their individual missions a one-pager which you specify a question you would like them to ask the Islamic Republic of Iran, or specific detailed issues you would like to have brought up. So this is something that our group will definitely follow up with these missions. And just as an aside, as I said earlier, we each have our responsibility. So let's just say the protests that are coming up outside of the UN on the 23rd and 24th, outside the UN in New York, when Ahmadinejad's going to speak at the UN General Assembly. Well, those protests, you might say, well, what really is that going to do? I mean, it's not going to stop anything. But let's just say an individual in Iran sees that protest and sees, wow, the international community is behind us, they haven't forgotten us. Maybe that will encourage them the next time out to go out on the street and not to lose hope. And so, again, it's really hard to specify what is taking place, but the movement is happening, and each individual adds to that.
One final question. You've been waving it back for a very long time.
Thank you very much for this wonderful seminar to bring the crime of Islamic Republic to the attention of us Iranian and the West and East that we all knew. But we knew that Islamic Republic from the beginning, when they started the execution from the first week after the revolution. But what I'm saying, in Iran, there are 70 million people. 65 million are against the Islamic Republic, and the 5 million are the mercenaries of Islamic Republic. But do you not think these 65 million in Iran, and also a few million outside Iran, the responsibility lies on our shoulder to, instead of struggling for gripping, to getting hold of the power, share the power under the umbrella of democracy, get together and share the power rather than get hold of the power. That is the only way we can have a free Iran under the umbrella of democracy. Iran belongs to 70 million and we all share that country. Thank you.